My dear friends, it's a great pleasure to have Dr. Sweta Adatia with us today to discuss on the National Education Policy 2020. We all know the Government of India, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi, has unveiled the new National Education Policy 2020. We are all discussing from the policy level, but from the science level, from the neuroscience level, how this national education policy is fitting inside, whether this national education policy is first of all addressing the brain development of the kids. How is the policy addressing to the requirement of the brain's development? This is what we are going to look at. Not only that, we are going to discuss about the various practices of education around the world in developing as well as developed nations. And let me introduce our guest today. Dr. Sweta Adatia is a young and dynamic neurologist currently on sabbatical at University of Cambridge, UK, and is pursuing Healthcare Concentration Administration program. She has been conferred a healthcare scholarship from the university and has been selected as brightest mind in healthcare. She is visiting specialist neurologist at RAK Hospital and has been associated with RAK for 5 years prior to taking the sabbatical. She is currently also a co-worker and project partner for Defeat NCD UN, United Nations, for launching NCT Care Funding Program for 90 LMIC, low and medium income countries, as part of summer program in university. She did her medicine from Mumbai, India, then paralytic stroke fellowship from Calgary, Canada. She is also a fellow of American College of Physicians, USA. She holds 13 gold medals in various subjects. Prior to UAE, she has worked in 3 continents: Asia, Central Africa, and North America. Dr. Sweta Adatia is a multi-talented and has achieved mastery in many fields other than medicine and neurology. She has done her Visharad BA in music, in harmonium, and has played table tennis tournaments in various national, district level championships and won many trophies. She is inclined spiritually and has a lot of interest in the science of alternative medicine. She has completed advanced pranic healing and pranic psychotherapy courses of Master Cho Kok Sui at Mumbai. She has a formal hypnotherapy training from New York in past life regression from the Master Dr. Brain Wiz, the author of very famous book Many Lives, Many Masters. She is also trained in neuro and biofeedback as a therapeutic modality for various neuropsychiatric disease from California, USA. She is the founder of the Neuromeric Assessment Program Path Perfect, which has helped and is helping people to chart their brain maps and help in confident and wise career choice for students and adults. She has conducted over 100 seminars to various teachers and students, linking education, neuroscience to various subjects like mathematics, science, arts, etc. A very simple person by nature, loving and always seeking to learn. She is liked by her patients, colleagues, and students. And more about Sweta Adatia you can find in our personal website www.drsweta swetaadatia.com. So www.drswetaadatia.com. So you can browse more about her accomplishments. Welcome to the dialogue series, Sweta ji, and it's wonderful to have you today. Someone who has actually worked in different continents, not just countries, different continents, and has a global knowledge. And you have been educated in India, then you have been working in UAE, then you have been working in Africa, then you studied in UK now. So apart from that, you are spiritually connected. So you are the right person to have to talk about, and you're a doctor, neuroscience doctor. So to talk about the development of the brain mapping to the national education policy. So first of all, my question to you, Sweta, whether this national education policy, is it required right now in India? That's my first question. What is your opinion on it?
Thank you very much, Satyaji. It's always pleasure connecting to the wonderful work that has been done by your end. Thank you very much for this invitation and on a very important topic. I think this is the right time. Country is discussing this, and no sooner we should also implement this national education policy, what has been talked about. Now, your question is, do we need to have this discussion? Well, definitely
Yeah.
yes. It's been over 50 years now that we have been following a very structured curriculum, which is not advancing the child holistically. And our purpose as not just for child, but the purpose is also to enhance the family, nation, and global growth for each individual. And I think it is crucial to understand what is the right methodology and the type to have such a program for amazing country like India. So I'm very, very happy that we are taking this up, and I will bring a lot of neuroscience fundamentals as we go on in this discussion.
Right, Sweta ji. You have been part of our old education system, which is not envisaged in this national education policy. I and you have been part of this education system. When you are undergoing all these top courses, you have been a doctor yourself, who's got educated in India. So you have been part of this national curriculum, which is existing already. Have you ever felt that there need to be an improvement in the education in the country, education policy, and whether there need to be any add-ons that need to be brought by the government?
Absolutely. So I think the good advantage that right now what I have is that gone through the same sort of structured curriculum with state board. I used to be a part of St. Xavier's back in India, and then having also exposure to these multi national universities or sort of in Canada and UK. Definitely what I feel is what was lacking in our current system, which I also underwent, my 12th 10 plus 2 sort of a system. The main thing was the lack in the creative thinking abilities. There
Yeah.
was a lot of importance given to rote learning. There was competitiveness which was beyond compare, which would essentially drain the brain out. There was a lot of stress. I mean, I still remember, in an arts class, which was very disturbing, and possibly that actually led to my interest in education. Last 10 years I've been spending a lot of time in neuroscience, education neuroscience. It's a typical field which connects psychology, neurology, and the field of education. I remember going to a class, arts class, and there was a drawing, a picture which was kept, which we were supposed to basically copy, and draw the same picture. And I was kind of sitting in the second last bench, but I was a great in poem writing, and I was just in my mood of writing the poem, and suddenly this art teacher walks by and then just primarily throws away what I am doing. And she said, "You are supposed to be copying this picture." It was a very, very disheartening moment. I don't remember, I was pretty much a kid, but I think that led a deep impression in my heart that finally it's an arts class, right? I mean, you have to give that freedom to a child, to what the child wants to do, and not have a structured curriculum even in the arts class. So it was
Right,
very
right,
disturbing. And I think the essence of why are we discussing this 10 plus 2 and the new education policy essentially is that is more of structured learning, which is only around memory. So it's around the
right,
capacitative function of who can work hard, who can learn more, who can
right,
basically memorize more, while
right,
the real education, the real wisdom, the real sort of practical implication is all about developing various pursuits of life, because learning can never be unifaceted. It has to integrate multiple inputs. You have to touch, feel, hear, see, multi-variety to actually grasp what the essence of the subject is all about. And
right,
very traditionally, we all grew up in a very traditional 10 plus 2 system, where either essentially you become a doctor, or if you don't have enough marks, you become an engineer. And I was one such person, and I often tell that there are two types of career. One is
yeah.
arranged career and one is a love career. And for me, both my parents were doctors, so it was essentially an arranged career for me. While
Right,
thankfully I liked after I entered into the field of medicine, and I spent 14 long years doing that. But at
right,
that point in time, it was essentially a very, very narrow focused sort of an attitude which even the parents,
yeah,
teachers, schools, nation had. And it's now we are in 21st century. This
right,
is the pivotal moment for a nation with a very high demographic dividend. If you look
right,
at the pyramid structure of our country, we have a whole burgeoning young people who are out there. And if we don't do this right now, I think we are degrading our essential fundamental values, our essential potentials. We will not achieve where India would be. So I'm absolutely very much happy that, and especially getting exposed outside what is happening outside our country, it
right.
is absolutely required.
Right, Shweta ji. Actually, one more the important thing which I wanted to ask you. You have been traveling across the world, and you have been working in different continents. You have worked in African region. You have studied in UK. Then you have been working in. You have been to US. So you have seen different education models. Now, by looking at that education model, have you ever envied this education model has to come to India, and if it comes, how it should be doable? Have you ever thought about it?
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about a few countries who are at the top when it comes to the best education, right? We all know that Finland tops that list every year, year on year. Why is it so? So we need to really look at what is it that makes special. And I would love to connect it to neuroscience in a while and spend some time even going into the details of the brain. But if we look fundamentally, what is really different, So we have Korea, we have Japan, we have all these countries who have always been on the first top 10 list of the best education system at the school level. Why is it
Right,
so?
right,
Essentially, it is very important to know what makes it so special. The first
yes,
thing which makes them so special is the limited number of days in a year which the child attends the school. On an
right,
average, children attend about 190 days of school, number one. Number
right,
two is that the children in the first initial 5 years, this is the time when the brain is absolutely at the best part of its growth. There are
right,
critical periods, sensitive periods where there is no structured curriculum. So there is
right,
more of a psychological safety. There is more of emotional learning than a
right,
program or a curriculum. And
right,
as the child becomes bigger, older,
yeah,
there is again no, there is complete freedom to choose the subjects. There is
right,
no structure or sort of a streamlining process which happens. So that
right,
is the third important key point why there is a lot of, there is creativity. There is freedom. There is a lot of potential for innovation in that
right,
particular education system. Nutrition
right,
is taken care
right,
of specially, and
right,
which kind of is very important for the brain growth, for the physical growth, etc. So the points are very very fine, and
right,
that is, I think, what is essential for us to understand. And
yeah,
let me share at this point, I think, a few slides which
yeah,
will help us understand why we really need to think a lot about all
yes,
these
Sweta ji,
issues.
yeah,
So let me share this slide first, that since we have picked this topic, what are the top
yes,
10 countries
right,
which are actually who are at the sort of the best realm of the education that they provide? And
right,
again, Finland is at definitely at the top.
yes,
The
yeah,
interesting thing about each of these country is
yeah,
essentially in the first few years of the child and
right,
a couple of years when they are about to be choosing their careers.
right,
Every country has this thing in common: the
right,
freedom to choose the subjects and the
yeah,
initial years leaving them without any structured curriculum, not
right,
giving them that open sort of a brain process to to grow and innovate within. So let me just
right.
share certain sort of slides here, which is fundamental to understanding what are we talking about, right?
So you're
So
presenting the neuroscience
that's right.
and the policy integration.
Correct.
Fantastic,
Absolutely.
Shweta ji.
Absolutely. So if we will understand these neuroscience, I think we will understand why these countries have adopted these sort of systems. What is the
Right,
scientific basis, and why we at this time are talking about the national education policy, and why it is mandatory for us to know the basic fundamentals of it.
right,
So educational neuroscience is not something which is new. There has always had been an interest in understanding psychology, neuroscience, and linking back to education, because brain is
absolutely,
fundamentally something which is very very prudent in the whole
yeah,
process of learning. So
right,
what
right,
really happens is, it's very important to know that the blueprint of the brain, the
right.
basic blueprint of the brain, is in the womb itself. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
about the third month that the brain's blueprint is all laid. Barely
Mhm.
1 month the woman even knows that she's pregnant, and by the second month the blueprint starts to be laid out. And that is what in our philosophy, in our Indian philosophy, is what we call as the Garbha Sanskar. So
Oh,
essentially, there are many, many studies which have shown that the child inside the womb, when what we call as fetus, is actually hearing, is seeing,
mm,
is
mm,
understanding what is being talked about, is knowing
mm,
what the environment is
right,
connecting to the mother's essential nature.
right,
Because by that time, as you can see what is up there, by 100 days, the whole
yeah,
sort of plan is made. By
mm,
100 days, the plan of the brain is made. What
mm,
is lacking is the size. That is when
mm,
slowly the size of the brain starts to grow. And
mm,
that size kind of picks up at the age of 3. That means that we have, from the time the child is born until the age of 3, a very rapid burst in the size, which we have to take care. We as teachers, we as parents, we as community, society, for providing enough nutrition, for providing
Right.
enough somatosensory stimulus for that brain to grow. So this
Yeah.
is essentially what we call as Garbha Sanskara.
If you see, Sweta ji, this stress Garbha Shankara, which you are mentioning in the PPT, the
Yes.
stress Garbha Shankara is part of a Veda.
Correct. Correct. So
Okay.
Garbha, so I'm trying to stress the point on Garbha Sanskara, yeah, right? So that is
Right.
where,
Right.
when a woman has to do certain course, certain
Right.
discipline, because the
Mm-hmm.
child's brain is now attending to the stimulus outside. For example, there have been studies where it has been shown that if you are reading violent novels, it has an
Right.
influence on the fetus's child. If the
Right.
woman is continuously watching horror movies, it has an influence on the fetus. If
Oh.
there is a fight which is happening in the family, if there is a disconcordance between the couple, that is impacting the brain at the 100 days. Now remember, 100 days, is the woman is barely literally aware about the pregnancy, but that is what is happening. So in the
Right.
olden days, these 9 months were considered very, very sacred and special, and especially Indian Vedantic tradition, where
Right.
the mother would actually go and listen to all Bhagavad Gita and lot of other sort of these Vedantic scriptures, because the
Right.
values actually
Right.
get translated onto the child. We all know Abhimanyu's story, right? We all
Right.
know how the Garbha Sanskaras and whatever was heard in the womb was actually then something which happened. So it is very important for us to know and connect it to the science, that
Right.
we have, the mother has to take care of nutrition, the mother should do the exercises, the mother should hear things which are good, the mother should practice things which are good, the environment has to be good, there should be
Right.
sattva, sattvic,
Right.
what we say, there should be sattva
Sattvic
in life.
foods.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
And
that is
thought
what is
should be
really important.
sattvic and food also should be sattvic.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
Right,
Food,
Sweta ji.
thoughts, all the activities, everything should be sattvic. And
Right.
now, when it comes, we were talking about that the child is grown, right? Now, this is a
Right.
very important point to stress, that
Right.
there are connections called synapses in the brain. The brain is made
Mm-hmm.
of cells. How skin is made of cells, the brain has cells, but they're all
Right.
interconnected. There is a messaging system, and these interconnections are called synapses. Now, very interesting point here is that when we are born, the child has about 2,500 synaptic connections. But
Oh.
by the age of 3, now from the birth to the age of 3, it becomes 15,000 connections. So,
Oh.
what we as parents, teachers, society, nation should do is, in those first 3 years, we have to give ample stimulus to the child. The child should hear, feel, touch, see, play, do. All this is important. Otherwise, these connections effectively don't get developed. And this is
Oh.
the duty of every single parent, to ensure to at least get that thing right. So it's very important.
So this is the neural network is what you are
Correct.
talking about. Yeah.
Absolutely. Correct.
Right. Right.
Very
Right.
right. And that neural
Fine.
network becomes thick, it becomes wide, it becomes intricate, it becomes deep only with adequate exposures. So
And
there
this
are some
neural network, this, sorry to interrupt, Shweta ji, these neural networks are the basis for developing intelligence and brain development. Am I right?
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. Are essential ingredients for cognitive capabilities in the future, for language,
Oh,
for
right.
skills, all sorts of
Right.
creative abilities. So this is the
Right.
network which is essential. And
Right.
if we talk about the brain has two parts. One
Right.
part is called the cognition part, or the rational thinking part, and the other part
Right.
is the limbic, or the emotional part. So
Right.
both of these are simultaneously growing at the same speed in this
Right.
particular period. So 0 to 3, extremely important.
Right.
What happens? What is the speed? Now, sometimes parents come and say that, oh, one day the child, if is not getting exposed to this, what is the problem? Very big problem. Because look at the speed with which the connections are happening. 700 neural connections per second. A
Oh,
single day lost is a few neuronal connections lost forever.
oh
So
my
I
God.
think 0 to 3 every single day is accountable from the point of view of the growth, right?
So first 3 years of a child's life, the brain
Absolutely.
development is very crucial.
Absolutely crucial. Very, very crucial. And this does follow on, and that is very important to understand in our policy. This does get followed on until the age of 7. So again, 3 to
Wow.
7, these 4 years, the speed of the connection is still very rapid. As much as possible, if we do
Yeah.
not restrict the child or do not streamline the learning, for example, twinkle twinkle little star, Mary had a little lamb, we all have done that, right? At
Right.
that time, if I am only allowing the child to learn twinkle twinkle little star, the child is actually at a loss, because the child can
Oh,
gather much more. The child has
oh,
the maximum ability to grasp anything in and around, and we are
understood.
trying to streamline it by giving a structured process, which is wrong. And if you look at Finland, they
Hmm.
do not allow formal process or formal schooling until the age of 7. And this
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
precisely fundamentally the reason why they do
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
So it's very
Understood.
important for us to connect
So
that.
that means per second is what you are talking about, 700 neural connections.
Absolutely.
So in lifetime, how many neural connections we generally have?
So in general, once the 15,000 is reached at 3, right, then slowly
Right.
some more neurons get formed. But after that, after the age of 5, what happens is pruning. That means cutting. All that is redundant, not necessarily gets cut out. And then the
Oh,
fine tuning happens. So initially, it's a whole sort of a rush of the interconnections, and then
right.
important pruning happens. So it's
It's
very
like
crucial. Both are important.
is it like root of a
Correct.
tree, root of a plant? So it is more tender initially, then it becomes more
Absolutely.
stronger. So whichever roots are not strong will go off.
Absolutely, very true.
Right, right, Shweta.
Very correct sort of an explanation.
Right,
Now, if we look at this sensitive period, what we talked early on, right now we're very clear on why 0 to 3 is essentially so important. Now, if
right.
we focus on this chart, we have
Yeah,
three important functions. One of them
right,
is vision and hearing, which means whatever
right,
we hear and see. Second
right.
is language, which is depicted
Hmm.
in the blue chart, a blue
Hmm.
line. And the third one is the higher cognitive. When I say higher cognitive, that is all mathematics, ability, critical ability to think, abstract thinking, etc. Now,
Right.
what happens if you look at the sensory pathways? Vision and hearing is -3, which means we are talking right from the womb. The
Right.
development of that has already started from the womb, and it's peak at the age of 3 months. If you look
Right.
at language, it's already peaked at 6 to 9 months, and then
Right.
by the age of 4, it's kind of pronounced. And
Hmm.
that is essentially the reason why we have to stress on as many languages that the child can hear, as is the
Hmm.
better. Mother tongue,
Hmm.
especially.
Hmm.
If we talk
Hmm.
about the exposure to mother tongue, if we talk about exposure to a foreign language, if we talk about
Hmm.
dual languages, everything is
Hmm.
welcome at this stage, because the
Right.
language neurons, the language
Hmm.
cells are hyperactive. They can absolutely take in the maximum possible challenge, which is
Oh, so
important.
language plays a major role in these times of critical sensitive periods of a child.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
what language is there? Anything of anything which you have identified, like
So
mother tongue or foreign language? Which languages actually play a major role in development of this critical sensitive period
correct.
of the brain?
So whatever the child gets exposure in the womb is the first and quick to develop. So it is very
Oh,
important to know the environment, what the language is being spoken. So if I am born in a Gujarati family and if I hear Gujarati even in the womb, that is going to be very instant. But if I am
right,
taught 2 foreign languages, 3 foreign languages at the same time, not taught, I'm
right,
passively listening to that, I will
right,
definitely get that. So the logic is that we should not withhold any learning process at that stage. As
right,
many languages, better it is. Now,
right,
why it
right,
is critical and sensitive? This is very important to understand, because
right.
every activity of the brain cell is at the best, at the peak. There is
Right,
heightened sensory process happening in the brain. We have to
right.
capitalize on that thing, what is happening for the
So
child.
there is a development of the brain is so fast and
Absolutely.
intensified that it
Yes.
should be fed with information. It should be fed with lot of learning.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that learning is not just merely listening, it is touching, it is feeling, it is doing, it is by sound, various kinds of sound. And that is what we call the playway method. Now, if you
Wow.
talk the first 5 years, what is to be given to the child? And let's go back to the policy discussion of 5 plus
Yeah.
3 plus 3 plus 4, right?
Right,
What should
Shweta.
be there in that first 5 years? Now, if we look at
Right.
this graph, we know that the peak of higher cognitive function, the peak of language, is exactly falling in that period. What is our
Hmm.
job? Our job is to give them a psychosocially safe environment. They will anyways learn because they are at the peak of their, we don't need efforts for the brain to learn. What is
Right.
required is emotional care, concern, psychological safety, attention. That is all that
Right.
a child requires. Now,
Right.
there are studies where if the child is let alone at that period, let's say we just lock the child up, there is no
Right.
sensory stimulus happening, there's nobody talking to the child, there's nothing really happening. And this is where all the neurons that were supposed to be peaked, they die out. And what we
Right.
call the sort of the damaged brain, or we have learning disabilities, etc., come
Right.
out. So
Right.
it's prudent to capture those 5 years and not stress the brain out by giving a structure. The moment you give the
Understood.
structure, you are
Yeah.
only inciting certain pathways of the brain and leaving out the unlimited potential which is already existing.
So this is this phase of creativity and imagination.
Absolutely.
So it should happen in this phase naturally,
Absolutely.
and that learning should match to those creativity and imagination is what you mentioned.
Absolutely. So the
Right.
environment should be given, a safe environment. All the
Right.
stimulus should be there. Playway methods are exactly like that. So the child can also touch the things, the child can see various things, etc. But most important at this point is screens. And that is what we keep talking to the parents also about. Now, if you
Yeah.
look, a typical 2-year-old won't eat the food without having the television to be on or without
Right.
having a mobile phone to be on. Now, what the parents are doing is strategically destroying the capability of these neurons
Right.
because they
Right.
are just focused on that one screen and one input, whereas they are missing out on the large parts of the input. So American Academy of Pediatrics says no screens please until the age of at least 18 months, and if you can
Right.
drag it to 2 years, just perfect. And that is
Right.
precisely the reason.
Hmm. Right.
In
So this is a
olden
very critical
times.
period. This is a very critical
Absolutely.
period where brain develops, and it has to be mapped to the learning, a
Absolutely.
systematic learning. Yeah.
No, there should not be rather systematic learning. There should be
Right.
only a proper learning environment. The brain will anyways
Oh,
gather. So
right.
which is
Understood. So we should give a freedom of choice, and
absolutely
we should give the environment of
correct.
learning so the students can the kids can pick up those learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very
Understood.
important.
Understood.
And if we look at this is a fantastic study from Harvard. This is
Right.
from Professor Levitt. And what he has done is he has shown the brain's ability to grow with changes. Now, the amount of effort it requires for the change, you look at for the adults and for the children, the brain's ability to change with in response to experiences. Now, look at this.
Right.
This is very important. The blue graph here. The brain's ability to change in response to experiences heightened at the age of 2, which means
Right.
it will change very quickly. 2, 4, 6, and
Yeah.
then it kind of slopes down. And if you
Right.
see again at 8, there is a sharp slope. So, whatever has to be done with that brain, we have
Right.
the window of opportunity in the first 8 years of a child's life. And then,
Understood.
if you really want to do something, the effort which requires is again exponentially increasing. And that
Right.
is the reason why making somebody study at the age of 40 is very difficult, but making somebody study at the age of 4 is very easy.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Correct. So it is the flexibility of the brain and the amount of the intensified learning the brain can have in this period of what you're mentioning up to 8 years is what you
Yes,
mentioned.
yes.
From 8 years or up to 8 years.
No, it kind of then slides down. So if you look at
Right.
10, 20, it kind of slides down. But until 8
Right.
is fairly good. So
Right.
very
Right.
minimal effort and massive
Right.
change,
So that's
which
where you
is
say where that is the period where you say, Shweta, that we should not have a pathway in education, but we should create environment of education up to
absolutely,
8 years. Right.
absolutely, absolutely.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So again, we go back to these things which I was explaining earlier, that there is a rational or the thinking brain, then there is one emotional or the feeling brain, and then there is one tiny brain called the reptilian brain, because we have all evolved. We
Right.
evolved from the little tiny creatures onto the chimpanzees and then apes and humans. We know these sort of evolution pathway. We
Right.
still have these brain seeds, so to speak, in our actual normal adult brain or the child's brain as well. Now, what is
Right.
the significance of this? The
Right.
reptilian brain, and we see lizards and snakes, right? What do? A little bit of something here and there, they kind of move, creep,
Right.
crawl.
Right.
There is an
Right.
essence element of fear in that. So that
Right.
reptilian brain represents the fear inside the brain. If the
Right.
environment is very stern in the beginning,
Right.
okay, this is
Right.
very, very important to understand in a school environment, in a class environment. If there is a stern environment, the child is forced to do something. The child is only allowed to do in a some sort of structured way. This fear brain starts to kick and activate. The reptilian brain, when it starts to active, the rational brain shuts down. Only
Right.
one of the brains can talk. So when the rational brain is out and your absolute ability is kind of cut off, what you are giving
Right.
to the child? Essentially a fear psychosis. The
Right.
personality of the child changes. And this
Right.
is a very important thing even in exams.
Right.
Why do most children don't perform well in exams?
Hmm.
You have stressed them onto a certain structure. You have put a lot of expectation from the child. 90%, 95% is the cutoff. There's this reptilian brain kicking in. Fear is there. Fear to
Right.
perform is there. And the rational brain shutouts. And then you
Right.
cannot effectively calculate. You cannot write. You cannot think. So this is very important.
So basically, in this evolution phase, the kids should not be conditioned on
Yes,
what knowledge they gather. The learning should not be conditioned. At the same, because of conditioning, they develop inhibitions. Certain
absolutely.
inhibitions in learning process. Once they are conditions, they are not able to evolve and discover their own talent. So
Yeah.
this is the time where we need to actually give them space, not to test them on the traditional models of examination,
Yes.
but to give them a model to actually evolve the learning process.
Absolutely.
That's
So
what you
what
mean
is
to say.
absolutely what is the traditional model of assessment? The
Right.
traditional model of assessment for 10 plus 2 is whatever is taught, you have to first learn and learn in, okay, you might understand. Let's say we understand 70% of the times, we don't understand 30% of the times, but essentially we have to reproduce. So our
Right.
end goal is reproduction. And what is the reproduction in the mind is learn, so memorize, rote learning. And what it
Right.
is doing to the brain is it's just utilizing one single pathway. It is not
Right.
allowing for abstract thinking. It is not allowing for other experiences to flow. It is not allowing for critical abilities of thinking. And again, fear,
Right.
expectations, which is again cutting off the whole rational process. So it's
Right.
very, very
Right.
important for us also to know what is
Yeah.
the best assessment.
So
Finland.
the key that you are mentioning here is the as you are talking about assessment, you are mentioning about the rational brain. So
Yes.
the entire process of education initially in that 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 model, the initial phases is to develop a rational brain and
Absolutely.
not that reptilian brain. That's what I understand. Am I right,
Correct,
Shweta?
correct. So
Right. Right.
our job is not just to develop one circuit of memory and
Right.
reproduction. Our job is to develop the larger big brain, which
Right.
has abilities of sensations, which has ability to understand color, which has ability to understand many other abstract formulations. So otherwise we are
Right.
just utilizing one circuit and absolutely undermining the potential of that brain. Now Finland,
Absolutely.
we were
Yeah.
talking about Finland, and it's very
Right.
important to know what is their assessment. The
Yeah. Yeah.
assessment is never on what is taught. The assessment is only on the learning outcome. So
So
this is the
learning
difference.
outcome.
Yes. So
Right.
this is the difference. We have to categorize what is my essential learning outcome from this, not what
Right.
I am learning. Why am I learning? What is the essential
Cool.
purpose of this learning, which is
So
crucial.
that is the reason the Honorable Prime Minister, when he was addressing Shweta, when he was addressing the Education Transformation Conference, so he was talking about this education policy is actually targeting how to think, why to think,
Precisely.
how and why aspect of thinking. That's what he mentioned. So is it actually about this what you are mentioning?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely critical. Very, very important point. Thank you for raising
Right.
that.
Right.
So we did discuss this, and the goal of learning. So what essentially is learning is not just to acquire knowledge, but to
Yeah.
be ability or to be able to use this knowledge in multiple settings.
Right.
So why am I doing this is more important than what I am doing and how I am doing. So very important here.
Right.
Now, brain is plastic. So when I say plastic, which means that, what is that? That means it has the capability to grow. It has the capability to expand. It does not have a set growth and then it kind of shuns out. It continuously evolves, grows. And that is
Right.
what we call as brain plasticity or neuroplasticity. Now, what drives drives this plasticity? It is the experiences which drive the plasticity. It is
Right.
not rote learning, it is not memory, it is not fixed curriculum, it is not a structure. It is, in essence, as many modalities exposure, as much of widened experiences, and that is the reason bringing discussions in the class, doing dramas in the class, bringing multimedia presentations in the class, making something, models and projects hands-on in the class is something what is pushing these sort of brain plastic experiences. So that is what is required. When we talk of how do we do this sort of learning, the process of learning, we understood why, but how do we do this is also critical to understand. And it is all embodied in this reptilian brain, right? And which is why relationship with the teacher is extremely important. The child should feel safe. The relationship with the teacher and child should not be sensitive. It should be very caregiving and sort of in a relaxed environment. Then we are focusing on growing the most of the brain.
Right.
Yeah.
But just a question here. Just a question here. Now, the traditional model in our education in India, do you think that the brain development traditionally, not the new education policy 2020, of course, in new education policy 2020, as you said, the brain development is mapped with the learning outcome in phased manner.
Absolutely.
5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. But in the traditional model, do you think that this was not facilitated, Sweta?
I don't think so this ever gets facilitated, because see, now let's talk about the brain. The brain has four fundamental aspects. One of them is the frontal lobe. One is what we call the back occiput. One is on the side, what we call temporal and parietal. Now, each of them has a distinct function. The frontal lobe is using abstract thinking, is using execution abilities. It is using mathematical abilities. While the back portion, visual, is using concrete experiences, visual experiences. While on the side is more of motor, hands-on, reflective observation, what it is doing, right? Now, in our traditional model, we kept on doing only one sort of a thing, where we didn't have the visual experiences, concrete experiences come in play. We didn't have these sort of abstract thought processes into the learning. Okay, I'm talking about into the learning. So what essentially 10 plus 2 was doing was, yes, the child would learn maths. Yes, the child would learn science, social sciences for that matter. But fundamentally, is it actually growing the brain? Is it growing the capabilities? Possibly not. And that is the reason why methodology is so essential. Now, critical thinking is very important by the teacher also to understand, right? And that is because essentially the child, we have talked about the child, but what is the learning pyramid? What, when in a teaching system, when we talk about the process and how, I love this National Training Laboratories pyramid, right? Now, this is essential to understand that the lecture is only 5% of retention of what is given to the child. Reading merely adds 10%. Addition of audio visual is adding 20%. Demonstration, a live demonstration is 30%. While if there is a discussion group, and Cambridge, believe me, I had the best of experiences in the discussion groups. From day one, Cambridge puts you into these sort of small discussion groups, absolutely supports you in those processes. There is a facilitator, there is a moderator, but most of the learning happens by dialogue, happens in the debates, happens in those groups. Then what about practice by doing? Is essentially the projects, the hands-on. And there is always if you talk about the Finland system or Korean system in the schools, there are always capstone projects. There is something to be done fundamentally in the ground, on the field, something which is hands-on, 75% learning. While if you teach somebody, and that is also a model adopted by a few countries where each child would then essentially be a buddy, be a partner to the other child and exchange that information. It's about 90% of learning.
Right. So this is the way the learning has to be facilitated.
Absolutely.
Right. It was not happening only because in the traditional school model, what we are trying to do is to leave the kids in the school and the teacher lectures and he comes back to the home and he writes some homework, again he goes back. So none of this audiovisual demonstration, discussion group, practice by doing, teach others and immediate use. It's not happening at all. Certain times we learn mathematical formula and throughout our lifetime we don't know why we learned.
Absolutely.
So that should not be the way of learning. That's what you try to mention. Yeah.
Correct.
Right. Got it.
And also very important thing is that it's very important in the whole sort of the whole curriculum also to not stress the child. Now, there is an influence of stress on the brain. The growth
Right.
of the brain gets dull. The child has other physical issues. If the child is exposed to stressful environment, toxic environment, both at home and school, there are 10 to 15% chances of the child to have a heart disease when he becomes an adult. There's so much of
Right.
an influence on the physical body, physical self of the child as well. So
Right.
fundamentally, all the four elements, which is physical,
Mhm.
which is mental, emotional, spiritual, should all be integrated into this process. So there is no lopsided development. If a car has to run, a car should have all the four wheels which are balanced. So
Right.
in
Right.
the whole curriculum system or in the whole sort of policy system, what we have, we should inculcate these four fundamental facts. Now
Right.
let me
Right.
tell you a little bit about also what is essentially the brain doing when it's listening to some lecture. It's just
Right.
passively, it's like filling the box, with something and then just shutting it down. Brain is not like that. We cannot
Right.
fill. So Swami Chinmayanand used to say beautifully, children
Right.
are not vessels to be filled, they are lamps to be lit. So what he
Right.
essentially meant was, please don't do this pouring business.
Yeah.
Give a concept, give a core formula, give core essentials, and then let them think. We
Right.
have to allow the brain to think and grow.
Right.
So this is very important. And
Right.
and most of these things, the processes are slowly coming up in our current curriculum. But what is happening? There is
Yeah.
stress to perform. There's a benchmarking has happened so high. The
Right.
marks have become off the roof, right? Sometimes you have 99% getting into a particular college. So what happens is, the child, after the school is finished, the child has to go to the tuition. The child has to ensure that he repeats. Reproducibility and repetition is only the way to enhance the memory. So the child
Right.
keeps on doing that and then
Right.
reproduces it. There was an experiment which was done, and this is an interesting experiment done in India itself,
Right.
where seventh grade children, they all finished their exams. The final exam was over. They go back to their homes, and then when they came back, for
Yeah.
coming into the eighth grade, and a
Mhm.
simple experiment was done. Their final exam seventh paper was given to them to do that
Oh.
now
Mm.
to do
Mm.
that repeat sort of a thing.
Mm.
20% of the children only could write something in that. 80%
Oh.
of them had absolute zero thing of what
Oh
was
my
happening.
God.
It was just
Mm.
a matter of 3 months. They had
Right.
gone out only for summer. and
Right.
and this, why would this happen? If there was a
Mm.
core concept which allowed the child to think, which allowed
Yeah.
all the four areas of the brain to integrate, more
Right.
dense connections form, this would never
Right.
have happened.
Right. Right, Shwetaji. So now the entire essence of the examination system, the way it is being now tested, actually what you mean to say is that it is a repetitive model. They write unit test, cycle test. So same information they keep writing in the examination, and there is no immediate use also. They don't teach also. So there is no usage of that knowledge what they gather. Ultimately, it is for the qualification. And I know you must be knowing in India, most of them will enter the from the sixth standard itself. They will start attending the IIT entrance program. There are integration models. So they keep focusing on IIT JEE only, which is going to happen only after 12th standard. They don't focus on co-curricular. They don't focus on extracurricular. And the curricular also, it is not put for immediate use. It's only a
Correct.
formula which they remember. So I think what you mean to say is that the learning pyramid is very important to be understood. That's what I understand from this
Yes.
presentation. Yeah.
And I think we didn't talk about the last four, where the subject flexibility is important, right?
Right.
Otherwise, we have this arts, science, commerce, right? Once you
Right.
enter the commerce, you're stuck all your life with commerce. While that is not the case with the Western education, you can
Right.
navigate your subjects anytime. You can add a major and
Wow.
a minor. Major in mathematics along with minor in music is, I think, a fantastic
Wow.
combination, which was not
Wow.
happening earlier, which should be done. And why is
Right.
so? Because brain is composed of left side, which is traditionally into thinking, integration, abstract process. It's more of linear numbers, logic, while right side of the brain is dance, drama, music, theater, literature. Now why you are combining these two subjects? You're growing the whole brain. Otherwise you're
Right.
just focusing on one side of the brain and then allowing the second half of the brain to be a blind spot, which would
Absolutely.
essentially hurt the child. So
Absolutely.
subjective flexibility, and not, from the seventh grade onwards pushing for IIT JEE, as you said, or for medical entrance exams, and then stressing the brain out is I think is redundant. It should never be done. The
Absolutely.
flexibility is important. When does a child realize what is good for him? Essentially, not before the child is even 25, 26 years old, and in a
Absolutely.
very early age, if you are focusing on going into one stream, you are again not doing justice to that child's brain. So it
Right,
is very
Shweta, right.
important at that point. Also vocational, providing vocational guidance, right? I think a time will come in 21st century when we might find a doctor very easily, but not a plumber. So which
Absolutely, absolutely.
the small little things where essential fixing is required is a part of the vocational training, which for
Right,
India is very important.
right, right. Fantastic. That vocational training is part of the national education policy, in fact, as you were mentioning. And as you said, the national education policy says after eighth standard, just the way it is happening in the Western countries. So India is trying to implement it now, saying that after eighth standard, you can choose your subject, pick and choose your subject, and you can navigate the subjects. And two, the vocational training is made compulsory in the eighth standard. As you said, today there are doctors, there are chartered accountants doing less. They are having less clients compared to a plumber and AC mechanic who enters into an apartment, gets hold of one good, he provides good service in that apartment. Rest of the 1,000 apartments are his clients. So I think the amount of vocational training is much more important, as you said. It's a good
And
takeaway
I
from
think
your
the
ideas.
focus on the IT, right? Coding
Yeah,
skill is
right,
absolutely must. I think tomorrow is all about robotics. It's all about
right,
automation. We're
right,
entering a very different century than what it was. And
right,
essentially, all these kids are exposed to technology right from the start. So,
right,
wisely used technology for interactive learning should be promoted. Not that,
right.
the laptops are bad or screens are bad. It should
True,
be
true.
wise, it should be interactive, and it
Right,
should have the capability to mold the child's skills. So coding
right.
skills and all, which would be compulsorily a part of this process, is, I think, phenomenal. We need to
Absolutely.
be focusing on that and doing that prudently.
Absolutely. In fact, Shweta, when as we are entering a further detailed discussion on 5+3+3+4 model, uh, and what I understand in the national education policy, the first is the primary school, which they target. First phase of discussion, the national education policy is primary school. Second is the middle school. Third is the secondary school, and finally, it is about the college education. So nearly about 18 years of age, the school education is provided. School education is provided. Now, in this time of 18 years, you have the ideas of the neuroscience which you have mapped with 5+3+4, and you explained about how the evolution of learning happens and how the students can navigate. Now, essentially, the primary school education, what it should focus, and what should the middle school focus, so that the learning also develops the brain and the maximum capacity of the brain is utilized. So
Absolutely.
how should it be programmed, and how the national education policy is actually trying to solve this problem?
Absolutely. So I think this is our last and key presentation. So we will
Right,
summarize again. 0 to 3 is a very important period for a child's life. Maximum neuronal growth is happening. The child is with the parents. The parents must ensure that the best of sensory environment is given to the child. Whatever is done at that age fundamentally stays for lifelong. Now,
right,
then comes the child when the child would step into a school. And 5 years, the first 5 years, we talked about not having a structured curriculum, only giving environment, only
right,
giving positive interaction, only giving psychological safety, good nutrition, allowing for multi-sensory exposure, and that would be beneficial for the child. Then we come into this 3, where the idea is essentially giving only the core concepts of learning and retain and relating it to why. Why am I learning a certain formula? A formula should be translated into the practical application of what the child might do 15 years later. That a
right,
certain physics formula is actually helping me do my domestic core better, because I can now apply a certain sort of a formula to see that, oh, this is what is happening in my house is because of this formula. So
right,
only core concepts relating it to the real practical applications would again take care of the holistic part of the process. And how?
right.
We have to
Yeah,
stress that by making the children be a part of discussion groups, play methods, multimedia, drama, bringing in music in relation to these subjects. There was a study which was conducted by us, in fact, in India, where we had a group of students who were very weak in mathematics. And there
oh,
was a group who was very strong in mathematics.
Right.
So we picked up these weak students in mathematics, and we sent them. We basically conducted a common test to understand, basically to validate the study, to understand what is their
Yeah.
average grades. So
Right.
obviously, the average grades of these weaker section was lower, and we
Right.
pushed them. We didn't push them on to do maths. Okay, we
Right.
pushed them into
Hmm.
dance class, because
Hmm.
the area of the brain where the numbers happen is closely linked to dance and music. We pushed
Right.
them into dance class. We gave them a curriculum of 6 months of rigorous dancing. We
Right.
again retested them, and their scores were matching now to the strong group. Now we
Right.
didn't do any maths concept. We
Hmm.
simply just allowed that part of the brain to grow.
Hmm.
So, but if we had included these core concepts with practical applications, our job is done. So,
Right.
eliminating all the big bags that we carry, eliminating this sort of, practice methodology that we have, eliminating rote learning, bringing
Hmm.
in multiple subjects which are also connected to values. So,
Right.
bringing value added essence into these subjects.
Hmm.
Example,
Hmm.
I was quite surprised to see at this example. There
Hmm.
is a milkman
Hmm.
who is pouring an X amount of water in his milk. What is the
Hmm.
profit that he is generating by doing this? An
Hmm.
absolutely wrong value which you are communicating to the child. When a milkman is putting water into the milk, he's actually diluting, and that's not right. And it
Right.
should not be called as profit. It should be, what is he cheating you about? So these
Right.
are all small little things which are very
Yeah.
important, and that, if thought well with the
Yeah.
core concepts, it
Right.
can be integrated. Value
Right.
based education. I think
Right.
Swami Vivekananda talks about it pretty
Right.
well in
Right.
his lectures, right? Swami
Right.
Chinmananji talks about it. It's very important. Stories.
Right.
Brain has a
In
phenomenal
fact,
power.
Swamini Vimalananda, when she was lecturing at Ahmedabad, she
Mhm.
once lectured and said, "You should not make the child smart. We should make the child good."
Good.
And
Yes,
Gurudev Swami Chinmanda used to say, "We should be aggressively good." So
absolutely.
it is not about being smart; it is about being aggressively good. So this learning process should facilitate goodness, is what you mentioned.
Absolutely. And
Good
Swamini
point.
Vivekanandaji also said that you want your kid to be good with you, but smart with others. Well,
Yes.
that's not in a sense. So value education is fundamental. Stories. Brain
Right.
has an immense capacity to understand the stories. It goes into the default mode network of the brain. Stories are
Right.
immediately connected. So motivational stories in the class, allowing the child to share the stories, making him a good storyteller. And this is the power of the West. We know
Right.
that the West has been doing very well with this. At
Yeah.
this level, so 3 in the middle school, all this should be encouraged. And again,
Right.
follow through on that. The subject should increase, but the core
Right.
concepts, the delivery methodology should stay the same. And
Right.
then multiple choices, IGCSE, GCSE.
Right.
You have so many subject choice options. You can choose psychology along with entrepreneurship, along with commerce, along with science. We don't
Multidisciplinary.
have that flexibility.
Right. Multidisciplinary.
Yeah, absolutely
Right.
multidisciplinary. Because
Right.
that is the time when you want again the brain to taste and experience a little bit of everything, and
Right.
then kind of walk into the career path. So it becomes
Right.
kind of automatically the love career, which we alluded earlier, and not really the arranged sort of career, which right now we force the children to go into.
Right. Absolutely true. Absolutely
So
true.
5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4
Right.
essentially is growing in parallel to the holistic development of
Right.
the child's brain, the
Right.
physical self, the value system, as
Right.
well as stress elimination, most
Hmm.
importantly, which is
Hmm.
crucial.
Right. But that is on the fourth level. 5 plus 3 plus 4.
Yeah.
Right. Fantastic. Correct.
So I think we come to an end of this
Right.
session. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share wonderful neuroscience. Let's pray and hope that our children essentially get the best of the education methodology which we are intending to have, and pray that India will also shine one of the days and we have benchmark institutions as to the Western education itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Sweta. It is wonderful to hear your session. Indeed, as you concluded, 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, everybody in India talks about the policy. Everybody in India, actually, everybody in India here who is decoding this policy, they just say 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. Very rarely people actually understand there is a neuroscience behind it. There's a neuroscience behind it. It's a wonderful discussion that we had. This presentation will also be sent to Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, National Institution for Transforming India, Raju Kumarji, and they will understand. They of course know the brain development is mapped to the learning pedagogy, but practically in depth in a how even a layman, its brain is a very complicated concept. As you were talking, I was able to consciously think how my brain would have got developed. And of course, all the viewers who are seeing this will understand that how the brain is very, very important. Every neuron is important. How blessed we should feel that neurons are supporting us in learning and speaking, feeling, emotion. The 5 dimensions which you mentioned: physical, mental, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, is completely from here. I think this is very important. I'm very sure Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi, when he was addressing how to think, why to think, when he said, that means he has consulted some of the top doctors like you, in the framing of this policy. And thanks a lot, Sweta, from coming here. There are thousands of teachers who are watching this who will actually benefit out of this discussion, because as teachers should understand what is the component of brain, what is the capacity of brain, how brain is important for a child. So the environment is important, not just the pathway of learning. Environment is important. So creating a nice environment for the students and kids is the responsibility of government, academia, and industry. And we professionals discussing about it, I very rarely know what is this, because I'm a chartered accountant, but listening to you has given me a lot of insight. And definitely this must learning. And I'm sure all the teachers here are thanking you for this wonderful presentation. Thank you, Sweta ji. And I'm sure by looking at this presentation, government should call you and reach out to you. And if you have any contact, you may actually provide in the presentation. So it will be wonderful if you can.
Thank you very much, Satyaji. I think ECC has done a fantastic job. There was a commission which was looking into most of the studies that I mentioned are also part of that commission and policy making system. So I think I'm very proud, first of all, that this is happening, and I pray that we implement it appropriately and correctly. And I think what you mentioned about the teachers is essentially fundamental. Every single teacher, if they just not consider it merely as a job but a conviction to change the way the brain performs or to get the best ability out of the tiny brains, I think we have done our job. So thank you again.
And fantastic, Sweta. In fact, Swami Vivekananda talks about power of the mind. Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda also spoke about the power of the mind with the body-mind integration, body-mind intellect integration. I think every spiritual leader, great gurus of this land from Bharat, always spoke about the power of a mind, and definitely the brain is the important element of a mind, is what I understand as a layman. I'm sure this explanation by you will give a lot of conscious learning to parents, teachers, government officials, and I'm sure this will bring a lot of learning to all the stakeholders in the education. Thank you, Sweta, for joining us today in spite of your busy schedule. Thanks a lot. Hari Om. Thanks.